introduce yourselves to our audience. Tell them a little bit about Union Terminal Imports, your goals, what you've accomplished so far, and we'll just get to know you a little bit.
Thanks, Dan. It's a real pleasure to be here and to be with all of you. This Brass Expo has been just fantastic for us as a company, and it's also been personally fantastic. I'm just having a ball. That's how I answer the question anytime somebody asks me, are you having a good show? I'm having a ball. So I started out as a child, as most of us did, and my dad bought our first Lionel train when I was 2 years old. I sold it to a boy down the street when I was 10 or 11, and I got into HO. And I had my third layout by the time I was in college, had a layout all the way through college. And then I moved to Hawaii. I was transferred with what was Ernst & Ernst at the time, one of the international CPA firms. I packed up the 2 boxes of plastic models I had at the time, which were Athearn Blue Box mostly, and took them with me. And I never opened those boxes for about 30 years until our daughter was born. And then I wanted to have a hobby that I could do at home and then do whatever our daughter wanted to do as she was growing up. Well, I very quickly learned that my rubber band drive, Athearn Blue Box B&O F7, was not the state of the art anymore. And so I went out and I bought a whole bunch of new plastic models that were available at the time. And very shortly after that, I became aware of brass models. That was about 1990, and I bought my first Oriental Limited Mikado, Great Northern, and a caboose. And then I began to accumulate freight cars and some passenger cars. And over the years, I collected quite a bit of Great Northern, Northern Pacific, all the Hill lines, SP&S, Burlington. Then I found out about Union Pacific, and at the time, Wasatch Model Company had just started importing cars. I became aware of Fred Hill and the Coach Yard, the original Whistle Stop. Anytime I came through, we lived in Hawaii for 37 years, so I had to come through somewhere on the mainland every time I came to the mainland on business, and somehow the layover flight was always in Los Angeles. And I always had time somehow to go to the original Whistle Stop. And so then I accumulated quite a large collection of Union Pacific. And then my partner in Union Terminal Imports, Ed Kurzynski, and I met through mutual friend Boyd Reyes. And Boyd called both of us, and then he said, you got to meet this guy, you got to meet this guy. So Ed was worried. He's also a brass modeler, had quite a collection, loved to run his trains just like I do. That's one thing that's special about us. We're operators. We run the wheels off of our brass trains and make sure they all run perfectly. And so Ed came over to my house the first weekend, and he brought his best shot at a 1960s Southern Pacific San Joaquin Daylight at the time. And the passenger cars were pretty close proxies for what the cars actually looked like at the time. And he had an Overland Models SDP 45 freight version. He hadn't added any steam boiler detail to it, hadn't added icicle breakers. But again, it was the closest he could get at the time with the models that were available. And that day, I got the Southern Pacific bug. So since then, I still collect lots of other things, but I also started accumulating a very large collection of Southern Pacific models. And it was that day that Ed and I said, you know what, we've got to get the correct models built for the 60s SP smooth side passenger cars for the Coast Daylight and the San Joaquin Daylight. So we immediately started bugging Fred Hill and said, Fred, please make these with the Coach Yard. Fred said, you know, that's really not our era. And we bugged him for about 2 years. And then finally one day he called us up and he said, look, guys, I'm going to teach you how to do this, and then you can make the trains you want yourselves. And so Fred took me to Korea with him, and Dave Allen on the next trip, and we were introduced to Seiho Jiang and Bu Rim Precision, and I see my sister's taking a picture of Seiho over there, and then we built those 2 trains. That was our first project, and then we did the SDP 45s, then we did the economy baggage cars, then we did, of course, being a UP guy too, I was fascinated by the transcontinental sleepers. And ever since I saw the pilot models of the Challenger imports, Penske-owned, ACF-built 10.6 sleepers that ran through, painted in UP paint or two-tone gray or even Tuscan, I just had to have those. And I even, at one point, I tried to acquire the pilot models, but I found out that they weren't available, and I learned that pilot models go back to the builder, and they pretty much stay there. So then I had to have those. So that was our next project, was the transcontinental sleepers, which we completed and are very proud of. And then we did the DODX flat cars, which were of great interest to my partner Ed. Now, this is a good chance for me to say that, by the way, if you want to interrupt me, go ahead. Otherwise, I'll
fine,
just keep
Chuck.
talking. So it starts with, Ed has to want it, or I have to want it, or we both have to want it. And so Ed wanted to do the DODX flat cars, and so we did those. Then we did the Kansas City Southern Belle, 1948. And then we did the Bluebird. And now we're doing the Wabash Bluebird. And the E-units we've actually delivered the first half of the E-unit project, which was the 3s, 4s, and 6s, were in dealers and their customers' hands. That's another opportunity for me to say we only work through dealers. We don't sell direct. And so they were out in about February. You had them and everybody else had them, and they went on through. The 7s, 8s, and 9s. I have at our table here the final production models, my own. I get them to look at first for final inspection. And then the New York Central units will be delivered late October, and then the rest of them, there'll be 3 batches. New York Central first, then 2 other batches, and by December, all the 7s, 8s, and 9s will be delivered. So back in April, we started working on the PAs, which we have a couple examples. I have 11 pilot models with me here. There's 3 of them up here with us. Seiho finished these and shipped them to me just ahead of the Southern Pacific Historical Society meeting last week, and they got rave reviews from the SP members, a lot of whom know these engines right down to the tiniest little detail. And we got very positive feedback about them. So after today, these will go to Ed, my partner, for inspection, and then he will send correction notes to Seiho, and then in probably a month and a half or so, we'll go into production with these. And the next project we've re-announced for the 3rd time is the hood version of the Krauss Maffe's. Mm-hmm. So we're going to do 4 of those, and you can find information about those, all the details and the catalog numbers on our website. And please get your orders in through our detailers, through our dealers.
Detailed dealers.
Detailed dealers. Through our dealers, we only build the number we have reservations for. And we only are able to finish the project if we have enough reservations to proceed with it. So this is the time to get your Krauss Maffei reservations in. It's also the time, very important time, to get your reservations in on the PAs, because at the pilot model stage, we can still take additional reservations. But in 2 weeks, October 16th, we're going to close off the reservations so that Seiho can begin to go into the production stage, and that's when we just can't add anymore after that. So a couple of upcoming projects then. I hope to get the 10.6, the Pullman-built 10.6 transcontinental sleeper project off the ground. The drawings are all done, research package is complete, It's ready to go to Seho. I just need enough reservations to proceed with that. And so another one, look at the ones available on the website, get your reservations in. The next one, and I guess I can say this, but I can't promise it. My next strong personal interest is to do the Illinois Central, City of New Orleans. I've got a City of New Orleans beautiful shot coming out of Chicago on my screensaver.
Well, this is a good spot to announce that
Yeah.
project then. Good.
And that's all I think about now is the City of New Orleans. So, and we have a lot of other ideas, but we always, of course, welcome input from all of you. And when we start to spot enough people bringing one up, an opportunity up, then that's when we'll start putting together a project.
Good, Chuck, thanks. So I want to just recap a few things. You're obviously a modeler, so you guys care about how things run, how they operate. You've made it very clear you're very detail-oriented, and you expect close to perfection from these or you're not happy. And we appreciate you support the dealer network, which ultimately is going to allow that product to get dispersed in the best possible way and the best numbers to the customer base. And so talk to us just a little bit more. Can you show us any details on
Sure.
these PAs that might not have been accomplished before?
I brought up a lot of when people are looking at SPPAs, there's a pretty strong preference toward the ones that are loaded with a lot of roof detail and interesting detail on the snowplow pilots and so forth. So I brought two of the versions up that have this one. The Daylight one has the low icicle breakers from the earlier era. It's got the wagon wheel antenna it's got the wagon wheel protector, and then it's got a firecracker antenna on top of it. It's got the Nathan 5-chime air horn. It has the brace at to support the pilot at the rear. This one has the pile headlight, or the upper light, the signal light or emergency light is the pile style, so you have that nice little vertical detail in there. The underneath, I can't show it to you really effectively here, but there's a detail that, as far as we know, has never been modeled before, and that's the coupler mounting pockets. It's not just a flat piece of brass that you screw the coupler onto. It's actually prototype detail underneath that the coupler slips into. Then if I can talk about the drive a little bit, when we started and we built our SDP 45s, we worked with Seho to build a brand new drive system. Now this one looks a lot like an Agene drive from a conceptual point of view, but there are a lot of changes to it. So we did all new tooling, and for the gear transition boxes. These are a little tighter than the Agene in terms of how much flex you get between the trucks, and yet they will form a curve to get around about a 36-inch minimum radius curve. They're dead quiet running and smooth running and strong pulling. And interior-wise, we're using a Canon EN22 motor, which a lot of you are very familiar with. But then the coupling to the towers is more of the Challenger imports, the old Sam Honksa style universal joint coupling. So it's very strong, and you're not going to get any slippage in the drivetrain.
And I think the advantage of that is it holds up through time a lot better too, because some of the other drives need work if you let it go long enough. Well, the other thing I wanted to point out, Chuck, is I think you guys have already produced more models than a lot of people are aware of, and that actually one of the YouTube questions we had was, what are some of the challenges as a new importer you face making people kind of aware of your product and so forth?
Well, I think the one, and of course, Fred's mentoring was excellent, and he told us about all these things, so nothing was a surprise to us. But so one of the first ones was, nobody knows you. They don't know what your quality is going to be, whether it's the drivetrain, the paint, the detail accuracy. Nobody's going to know, and they're going to hold back and they're going to want to wait till they can put their hands on it, and then they'll decide to buy it. So we had to make 2-3 times as many models for that first project as we had reservations for. So we took a very significant financial risk. We don't require deposits from anybody. We don't require them from our dealers. Most of our dealers, in turn, don't require them from anybody. So Ed and I were at risk financially for whether we'd be able to sell the models. And eventually, there was once the people that hadn't reserved them saw them, there was a very strong pickup. Most of them were bought. A few trailed out, but of course now they're all gone. And second project, same phenomenon, but a little better. Third project, same phenomenon, but much more reservations, much fewer we had to build with uncertainty. And then by the fourth project, we followed Fred's advice, which is, okay, now it's time to just say, here's the deadline, and we're only making the number we have reservations for, which is what we did. Now, the flip side of that is we could have built 40% more models, because once the guys saw them, they said, I want one of those. And we said, well, I'm sorry, we said put your reservations in. And now we're up to 7 or 8 projects, and I think people are starting to get the message that, man, if I want one of those, I better get my reservation in. Because also the dealers now, as was mentioned last night, in the old days, the dealers would buy the models without knowing who was going to buy them, and they would put them up on their shelves. Well, they don't do that anymore. The dealers only, they'll commit to what they have reservations from their customers for, give us the reservations, and that's all that gets built. So if somebody walks into a dealer, some of our dealers, I think, probably will pick up some models and take the risk, but very few are going to be available after they're initially delivered.
Yeah, we are one of the few dealers that will order on speculation. But even we tell our customers, listen, if you reserve it, you're locked in at that price. If I got 2 or 3 sets and I know it's a sold-out project, I'm bumping that price a little bit. And so it behooves them to reserve. It's the kind of communication we need so the right amount get built. And then it is nice, though, sometimes to see that price go up a little bit. But that makes you feel good when you reserved one, you've locked one in, you got what you want, you got it at a very fair price.
Yep. So another challenge, which it's been absolutely a pleasure working with Seho every minute from the start. We we communicate very well together, but because we aren't completely fluent in one another's languages, we're very patient with one another, and we just keep going back and forth until and Seho says, "Oh, Chuck, I understand." So, and I say, "Seho, I understand." And we honestly send a lot of photographs back and forth. So this modern communication technology we have has made this much, I don't want to say it's easy, it's not easy, but it's easier than back in the old days where you had to mail things to one another, or where you had to fax things to one another, or you had to express packages to one another, because now we can just take a picture of it on the iPhone and then hold it up to the Skype camera or whatever, or we can send files back by Kakao Talk, which is the Korean.
Say that one more time.
Kakao Talk.
One more time.
Kakao Talk, which is Seho taught me to. Another thing I learned. I'm trying to be respectful of the time, but there's fun things to talk about. One of the very first things was I was comfortable speaking with Seho on the phone, and then one day Seho said, "Chuck, you must learn Skype." And I said, "Seho, I'm scared to death of technology." And he said, "Chuck, you must learn Skype. I will teach you." And so right on the phone, he said, "Okay, take your laptop. Now punch this button. Now punch this button." And we did.
So he builds brass trains, and he's a technical advisor.
And he's your
nice.
Seho's your IT guy. That's right. So anyway, so then we much more effectively communicated on Skype, because you could actually hold something up, and we could see it. Well, then he moved me to Kakao Talk,
which is kind of like WhatsApp, a lot of different things.
Very similar to WhatsApp, and so we can share pictures with one another and files and CAD drawings and things like that. So, but also I learned, Fred told me about this, but I still had to learn it for myself. that we, the importers, when we do the research and we prepare the drawings and we send all this to SEHO, we have to be very clear about what it is that we're asking for. And then, you know, there's so much, there's no way to change this. There's going to be a lot of back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. He's got a team involved, and then there's me and Ed and the guy that does our drawings. And there's so many different little points where even when you had a clear understanding about something 6 months ago, that honestly, it can get lost. And then, and so sometimes you just have to keep communicating, keep checking. Check, 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 check. And we do that, and that's how we end up with these extraordinarily detailed and gorgeous models.
Yeah, and you said you build up friendships, don't you?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just been an absolute ball.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, that's nice to hear. We sure enjoyed getting to know you a little bit. And keep up the great work, because you guys are making some absolutely beautiful product. Thanks,
We
Chuck.
will. Thank you. And thank you for your help, too.
You're welcome.